The Seattle Seahawks are one of the best teams in the entire league, and I think they have a good chance to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, but they do have one fatal flaw they have to overcome if they want to make it there. And in my opinion, it all comes down to one player, and that is Sam Darnold and how he's going to play in big games, because we have a good sample size now that shows us that Darnold does not show up in the biggest spots. He does not show up in the biggest games, and that is a major concern for a team with Super Bowl aspirations. Now, I would like to preface this by saying that Darnold has been pretty tremendous this entire season for Seattle. They got off to a 7-2 start. They had one of the best offenses in the league. Jackson Smith-Njigba is by far leading the league in receiving yards, and that's really due to the connection that he does have with Sam Darnold. And again, John Schneider this offseason continues to prove he's one of the best general managers in the entire sport, because a few years ago, he traded away Russell Wilson, got back a ton of assets to the Denver Broncos. It was very clear early on that Russ was not the same player, and what did Schneider do this offseason? Well, he did it again. He traded away Geno Smith for, again, some pretty decent assets, and it's pretty apparent that Geno is not the same player he was the last couple of years with the Seahawks. So he pivoted off of Geno. He brought in Sam Darnold on a pretty team-friendly deal where there's not a ton of guaranteed money down the road. It was a low-risk, high-reward move, and we're seeing it pay off in dramatic fashion this season. Darnold, through 9 games, has 2,500 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and a 71.2 QBR, which is good for 4th in the entire league. And I would say up until this last week against the Los Angeles Rams, Darnold was in the mix to be the NFL MVP this year. So I don't want one game to overshadow the success that Darnold has had this year, revitalizing his career the last 2 seasons, last year as well with the Minnesota Vikings, throwing for over 30 touchdowns, 4,000 yards, leading them to the playoffs. But in these last 2 years, we have a 3-game sample size now where Darnold comes up mightily small in the biggest spots in must-win games, just huge games to set his team up for success. We can go back to 2024 with the Minnesota Vikings. They were in a position to win the NFC North, be the #1 seed in the entire playoffs, and all he had to do was go on the road against the Detroit Lions week 18 and just take care of business against a defense that had so many injuries on that side of the ball. And I think everybody watching this video, if you did watch that game, Darnold was missing throws left and right. He could not deal with any pressure the Lions were getting on him, and it was a disastrous performance. Darnold did not turn the ball over in this game, but he was 18 of 41 for 166 yards, averaging 4 yards an attempt and 0 touchdowns. And I understand you're on the road in a very hostile environment, but to have that bad a performance against a Lions team that had so many injuries in their secondary, Aiden Hutchinson was not playing, that is just simply inexcusable. But to make matters worse, the very next week, the wild card round in the playoffs against the Los Angeles Rams, the same team he struggled with on Sunday, Darnold again did not show up. He was 25 of 40 for 245 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 fumble, and 9 sacks in this game. Obviously, the offensive line had some issues in this spot, but again, if you watch this game, a lot of those sacks were on Darnold for holding the ball too long or just finding himself running into some pressure. So the 2 biggest games for the Vikings last season, their quarterback simply did not show up, and that was a huge reason why, despite winning 14 games, they were a wild card team and a first-round exit in the postseason. And I do think those 2 games did impact the Vikings' decision to not extend Darnold on a long-term contract, because they couldn't get kind of the image of those final 2 games out of their minds. And now we can look back with hindsight and see how JJ McCarthy's been playing this year and kind of realize, hey, maybe that wasn't a smart decision by the Vikings organization. But I honestly don't fault them for making that decision in real time, because you just spent a first-round pick on a quarterback. The guy that you had playing the entire year did not show up in the biggest spots, and you didn't even win a playoff game. But I think if you were John Schneider in the Seattle Seahawks organization, you were okay and willing to take a risk on Darnold despite those 2 final games of the season, because his entire body of work in the 2024 year was honestly really, really good. So again, I'm not saying Darnold is a bad quarterback or the Seahawks going out and signing him to a contract was a bad move. It was actually an excellent move. But what I am saying is it does seem like Darnold struggles in these big games, and that does limit your ceiling as a team if that remains to be the case. I mean, this past Sunday against the Los Angeles Rams, whoever won this game was going to be in the driver's seat to win the NFC West. I was pretty high on Seattle heading into this season. I did view them as a playoff team. I love their overall roster talent. I'm a huge fan of Mike McDonald. And Seattle is still easily going to make the playoffs, but I don't think they have a good chance to win the West now. This game was so huge for Seattle because they had already lost a game in the division week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers, where the Rams, they actually swept San Francisco, and I assume they're also going to sweep the Arizona Cardinals. So now after Sunday, the Seahawks are a game behind the Rams. They also don't have a chance to really get the division tiebreaker, so they have to make up 2 games now to actually get first place in the West. The way I described it might have been a little complicated, but essentially the Seahawks have to have a better record than the Rams. They cannot have the same record or the Rams do get the tiebreaker to win the division. So dropping that game to Los Angeles was a huge deal, and I think Darnold is really the one that deserves all the blame for that loss, because the Rams offense has been one of the most high-powered units in the entire league this year, and Seattle's defense and Mike McDonald pretty much shut them down. The Rams only scored 21 points. They had 249 total yards, and the MVP leader in Matthew Stafford had 130 passing yards the entire game. You simply cannot ask your defense to play better than that, especially when the Rams start 4 separate drives inside of Seattle territory due to Sam Darnold turnovers. And the thing about these interceptions is they were not fluke ones where it's off a couple helmets or it's tipped at the line of scrimmage and intercepted. Darnold was hitting Rams players in the chest. I mean, he was throwing it right to them time and time again. And I honestly don't think there's a single pick in that game that I'm putting on anybody else than Darnold. I mean, he was just throwing the ball to the wrong team. And after watching all these games, there is a common theme on what rattles Darnold and kind of throws him off his spot a little bit, and that is interior pressure and just getting a couple hits on him early in the game. You do that, you get in his head a little bit, and as Darnold was quoted saying really early in his career for the New York Jets, he begins to see ghosts. Now, as I mentioned, while this loss probably does prevent Seattle from winning the division, they're still going to be fine in the big picture. They're 7-3. They're going to be a wild card team, probably the 5th seed if I had to guess. And the remaining schedule is really not too hard. Their next 3 games are against the Titans, the Vikings, and the Falcons. They should be favored in every single one of those games. But we are going to see a couple more big games that Darnold has to play in this season. He's going to be home against the Colts. He's going to be home against the Rams again, and then at the 49ers in week 18, which could be a massive spot. And depending on how he plays in those games, that is going to impact kind of the panic meter heading into the postseason on how far the Seattle team can go with Darnold at the helm. I really do believe they're one of the more complete teams in the entire league. They don't really have a flaw on their defense. Their scheme and coaching on that side of the ball with McDonald has been so good for 2 years now. On offense, JSN has simply been unguardable. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, a good 1-2 punch in the backfield. And the only trade deadline move they made was getting receiver Rashid Shaheed from the New Orleans Saints, and I'm a very big fan of his as well. He's one of the best pure deep threats in the entire league. I think you've already kind of seen him open things up for Jackson Smith and Jigba and other players on the offense underneath in the intermediate range because of the threat that Shaheed poses to defenses. So by no means am I out on the Seattle team. I do think they could be a team that goes on the road and does win a playoff game or two, because they have proven now under Mike McDonald they're one of the best road teams in NFL history. It's one of the craziest statistics ever because they're so much better on the road than they are at home. So I don't think they would be that uncomfortable playing on the road. But again, in the postseason and January football, being able to play in Seattle in that climate and potentially rain could be actually a big advantage for them if they were able to host some playoff games. But ultimately for me, Seattle has enough talent and good enough coaching to go very far in the postseason. It's simply going to come down to Sam Darnold. Can he not turn the football over? And can he just play solid football in these big spots against good defenses? And if he can do that, sky's the limit for Seattle. But if he can't, we're going to see a repeat of what happened this past Sunday against the Los Angeles Rams. And I would be shocked to see the Seahawks even win a playoff game this year. But I want to know what you think about Sam Darnold in the comments section below. Do you think he just had a bad week, or do you also have major concerns about him playing in these big games? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. But subscribe to the channel if you are new. Drop a like in the video if you did enjoy it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.